Carter Mitchell adjusted his expensive watch and checked his phone for the third time in 5 minutes. The charity gala invitation had mentioned a unique literary experience, but he hadn't expected to find himself standing outside a small bookstore in downtown Seattle on a rainy Thursday evening. His assistant had insisted he attend, something about good publicity for his tech company's community outreach program. Carter preferred writing checks to actually showing up, but here he was, surrounded by people who genuinely seemed excited about books. The warm glow from the bookstore windows cut through the evening drizzle. Through the glass, he could see people browsing shelves, holding steaming mugs, and engaged in animated conversations. It looked cozy, intimate, everything his sterile penthouse office wasn't. Carter straightened his designer suit jacket and pushed open the door, a small bell chiming his arrival. "Welcome to Pages and Dreams," a melodious voice called from somewhere between the towering bookshelves. "The author reading starts in just a few minutes. Feel free to grab some coffee and browse around." Carter followed the voice through narrow, aisles packed floor to ceiling with books. The scent of old paper and fresh coffee created an oddly comforting atmosphere. He'd grown up surrounded by technology, screens, and the constant hum of progress. This place felt like stepping into a different era entirely. He rounded a corner and stopped short. A woman with long black hair tied in a messy bun was balanced, precariously on a ladder, reaching for books on the highest shelf. She wore a flowing emerald dress that somehow looked both professional and artistic, with paint stains on the sleeves that suggested she was more hands-on than most event organizers. He knew. "Need some help?" Carter asked, stepping forward instinctively as the ladder wobbled. The woman looked down, and Carter found himself caught by her warm brown eyes and genuine smile. "That would be amazing, thank you. I'm trying to grab that collection of poetry up there, the blue spine with gold lettering." Carter reached up easily, his height making the task simple. As he handed her the book, their fingers brushed briefly. "Local author?" he asked. "Actually, that's my dream," she laughed, climbing down gracefully. "I'm Lily Chen, and this is my bookstore." "Well, it's my grandfather's bookstore, but I've been running it since he passed last year." "And you are?" "Carter," he replied, deliberately omitting his last name. Something about her openness made him want to be seen as just another person, not the CEO whose photo regularly appeared in business magazines. "This place is incredible. How long has it been here?" Lily's face lit up with pride and nostalgia. 43 years. My grandfather started it when he immigrated from Taiwan. He believed books could bridge any gap between cultures, languages, even hearts." She gestured around the cozy space. "Every book here has been carefully chosen. We might not have the latest bestsellers immediately, but we have stories that change lives." Carter found himself genuinely intrigued. In his world, everything was measured by profit margins and market share. The idea of choosing books based on their ability to touch hearts rather than sales potential was foreign yet appealing. "So what brings you to our little literary gathering?" Lily asked, leading him toward the coffee station. "Are you a writer, reader, or just someone who got lost in the rain? Honestly?" Carter accepted a steaming mug of coffee that smelled like cinnamon and possibility. "I'm not sure. My assistant thought it would be good for me to attend. I spend most of my time dealing with code and algorithms. Books are different." "Different? How?" Lily's curiosity seemed genuine, not polite small talk. "Books require patience. You can't skip to the end or optimize the experience. You have to trust the author to take you on a journey even when you don't know where you're going." Carter surprised himself with the honesty. He rarely shared such thoughts with anyone. Lily nodded thoughtfully. "That's beautiful, actually. Most people see books as entertainment or education, but you're describing them as acts of faith. Their conversation was interrupted by the lights flickering, then going out completely. The room filled with concerned murmurs as people fumbled for their phones' flashlights. "Don't worry, everyone," Lily called out cheerfully. "This happens sometimes during storms. I have candles, and honestly, there's something magical about sharing stories by candlelight. It's how humans have done it for thousands of years." Carter watched, impressed, as Lily efficiently lit candles around the store, transforming the blackout from a problem into an opportunity. Within minutes, the bookstore glowed with warm, flickering light that made everything feel more intimate and mysterious. "Well," Lily announced to the gathered crowd, "since our scheduled author is probably stuck in traffic somewhere, why don't we share our own stories? I'll start." She perched on a small stool near the center of the store, candlelight dancing across her features. "When I was 7, I found a book hidden behind other books on one of these very shelves. It was a collection of love letters that had been left behind by accident. I spent the whole afternoon reading about two people who loved each other but were separated by an ocean. I didn't understand all the words, but I understood the feeling. That's when I knew stories had power." The audience was captivated, and several people volunteered to share their own literary memories. Carter found himself drawn into the warm community that Lily had created, feeling more relaxed than he had in months. "What about you, Carter?" Lily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "What's your story?" Carter hesitated. He'd built his entire adult life around maintaining control, revealing only what served his purposes. But something about the candlelit atmosphere and Lily's encouraging smile made him want to be honest. "I've never told anyone this," he began, surprised by his own words, "but I used to write stories when I was a kid. Nothing sophisticated. Adventures about kids who discovered they had superpowers or could travel to other worlds. I filled dozens of notebooks." "What happened to them?" Lily asked softly. "My father found them when I was 12. He told me I was wasting time on fantasies when I should be focusing on practical skills. The next day, he signed me up for advanced computer programming classes." Carter's voice grew quiet. "I threw away all the notebooks. I convinced myself he was right. That imagination was a luxury I couldn't afford." The bookstore had fallen, silent except for the soft sound of rain against windows and candle flames flickering. Carter felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't experienced since childhood. "I think," Lily said gently, "that 12-year-old Carter would be amazed to know that adult Carter helps create technology that probably seems like magic to lots of people. Maybe you've been writing stories all along, just in a different language." Something shifted in Carter's chest, a loosening of tension he'd carried for years. When was the last time someone had looked beyond his success to see the person underneath? As the evening progressed and the lights remained out, the small group continued sharing stories, dreams, and laughter. Carter found himself sitting closer to Lily, drawn into conversations about books, travel, family, and the courage it takes to pursue dreams that don't guarantee success. "I should probably go," Carter finally said, noticing it was past 10 o'clock. This was unexpected in the best possible way. "I'm glad you came," Lily replied, walking him to the door. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under streetlights. "And Carter, I hope you'll consider picking up that pen again sometime. The world needs more stories, especially from people who understand both technology and magic." As Carter walked to his car, he felt something he couldn't quite name, a lightness, a sense of possibility he'd forgotten existed. He looked back, once to see Lily silhouetted in the bookstore window, blowing out candles one by one. For the first time in years, Carter Mitchell went home and wrote. Not code, not business plans, but a story about a man who had forgotten how to dream until he met someone who reminded him that some of life's most valuable treasures couldn't be programmed or predicted. They could only be discovered by those brave enough to turn the page. 3 weeks after the blackout at Pages and Dreams, Carter found himself doing something he'd never done before, deliberately scheduling time for non-work activities. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, he would slip away from his office and spend hours at Lily's bookstore, sometimes reading quietly in a corner chair, sometimes helping her organize events or simply talking about everything and nothing. Lily had awakened something in him that had been dormant for decades. She challenged his perspectives, made him laugh, and treated him like Carter the person, not Carter the CEO. She had no idea about his wealth or business empire, and he wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. In her presence, he remembered what it felt like to be curious, spontaneous, even playful. "You know," Lily said one evening as they arranged books for an upcoming poetry reading, "for someone who works with computers, you have surprisingly gentle hands with old books." Carter smiled, carefully placing a vintage leather-bound volume on its shelf. "I'm learning to appreciate things that can't be updated or upgraded. There's something to be said for permanence." Speaking of permanence, Lily's expression grew serious. "I need to tell you something. The bookstore is in trouble." Carter's attention sharpened immediately, though he kept his voice casual. "What kind of trouble?" "Financial trouble? Big trouble." Lily sank into one of the reading chairs, looking suddenly exhausted. "There's a development company that wants to buy this entire block. They've made offers to every business owner and most have already sold. The few of us holding out are facing increased rent and pressure tactics." A cold knot formed in Carter's stomach. "What kind of pressure tactics?" "Building inspections that find expensive violations that never existed before. Delayed permits for basic maintenance. Mysterious problems with utilities." Lily's voice carried a mixture of anger and defeat. "My landlord told me yesterday that if I don't accept their buyout offer by the end of the month, he'll have no choice but to terminate my lease. Apparently, the developers have made him an offer he can't refuse." Carter's mind raced, a terrible suspicion beginning to form. "Do you know which company is behind the development?" "Some tech firm called Mitchell Innovations. I looked them up online. They're huge. They specialize in creating smart city developments that integrate technology with urban living." Lily's laugh was bitter. "Ironic, isn't it? Technology is literally going to destroy the one place in the neighborhood that values old-fashioned human connection." The world seemed to tilt around Carter. Mitchell Innovations was his company. The downtown Seattle revitalization project was his brainchild, designed to create a cutting-edge tech campus surrounded by high-end residential and commercial spaces. He'd approved the development plan months ago, viewing it as numbers on a spreadsheet and architectural renderings on a wall. He'd never walked through the actual neighborhood, never seen the businesses and lives that would be displaced. "Carter?" Lily's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I need to go," Carter managed, standing abruptly. "I'm sorry, I just remembered something urgent." "Of course," Lily said, though confusion and hurt flickered across her features. "I didn't mean to dump all this on you. I know there's nothing you can do about it." Carter's heart broke at her words. There was everything he could do about it. He could stop the entire project with a single phone call. But doing so would mean revealing who he really was, and he wasn't sure he was ready to see how she would look at him then. That night, Carter sat in his penthouse office surrounded by charts, projections, and models for the Seattle development project. For the first time, he truly saw what he was building and what he was destroying. The bookstore that had become his sanctuary would be replaced by a sterile coffee chain. The community center, where elderly immigrants gathered to share stories from their homeland, would become a luxury spa. The small family restaurants and shops that gave the neighborhood its character would be replaced by corporate franchises and high-end boutiques. The next morning, Carter called an emergency meeting with his development team. "I want alternatives," he announced without preamble. "Different locations, modified plans, anything that would allow us to build the tech campus without displacing the existing businesses on Maple Street." His head of development, Sandra Walsh, looked confused. "Sir, we've already invested significant resources in site preparation. The current plan maximizes both space utilization and profit margins. Any major changes would cost millions and delay the project by at least a year." I don't care about the cost or the delay, Carter said firmly. Find me alternatives. May I ask what's prompted this change of direction? Sandra's tone was carefully neutral, but Carter could see the concern in her eyes. He wasn't known for impulsive decisions or humanitarian concerns. Let's just say I've gained a new perspective on the value of preserving community spaces, Carter replied. Schedule site visits to 3 alternative locations by the end of the week. Over the next several days, Carter threw himself into finding a solution that would save Lily's bookstore while still moving forward with his company's expansion plans. He avoided Pages and Dreams, afraid that seeing Lily's growing desperation would make him reveal everything before he had a workable solution. Meanwhile, Lily noticed Carter's absence and worried that her financial troubles had frightened him away. She threw herself into organizing community support for the threatened businesses, reaching out to local media, city council members, and anyone else who might help them fight the development. It was during one of these community meetings that Carter's 2 worlds finally collided in the most painful way possible. Lily had organized a town hall meeting at the community center, inviting residents and business owners to discuss their options for opposing the development. She'd managed to get a reporter from the Seattle Times to attend, hoping media attention might help their cause. Carter had just finished touring the 3rd alternative development site when he received a text from his assistant. Media asking for comment on downtown development project. Town hall meeting happening now at Pine Street Community Center. Against his better judgment, Carter decided to attend the meeting anonymously, hoping to understand the community's concerns better so he could address them in his revised plans. He slipped into the back of the crowded room just as Lily was addressing the gathering from a small stage at the front. Pages and Dreams has been part of this community for over 40 years, she was saying, her voice strong despite the emotion behind it. It's not just a bookstore. It's a place where immigrants practiced English, where teenagers discovered poetry, where lonely people found connection. Mitchell Innovation sees our block as a line item on a balance sheet, but for us, it's home. The reporter raised his hand. Ms. Chen, have you attempted to contact Mitchell Innovations directly? Perhaps their CEO, Carter Mitchell, would be willing to discuss a compromise. Carter's blood turned to ice as Lily's expression shifted from hope to bitter recognition. Carter Mitchell, she repeated slowly, her eyes scanning the crowd. I actually know someone named Carter who works with computers. What are the odds? Her gaze landed on him in that moment, and Carter watched as understanding dawned across her features. The color drained from her face as she recognized him standing in the back of the room. You, she whispered, though her voice carried in the sudden silence that had fallen over the gathering. You're Carter Mitchell. The room erupted in surprised murmurs as people turned to look at him. Carter felt trapped, exposed, and utterly unprepared for this moment. Lily, I can explain, he started, moving toward the stage. Explain what? Her voice was steady, but Carter could see the pain and betrayal in her eyes. How you've been lying to me for weeks. How you've been pretending to care about books and community while secretly planning to destroy everything I love. That's not how it is, Carter said desperately, aware that the reporter was frantically taking notes and probably recording everything. I didn't know, I didn't understand what the development would mean to people like you until what? Until you got bored playing normal person with the naive bookstore owner? Lily's composure finally cracked, revealing raw hurt underneath. Was this all some kind of research project for you? Get close to the opposition to understand their weaknesses? No, Carter's voice rose above the crowd's murmurs. Everything between us has been real. The most real thing in my life, actually. I never meant for this to happen. You never meant to get caught, Lily corrected, her eyes bright with unshed tears. There's a difference. She turned to address the crowd, her voice growing stronger. Well, everyone, we have the CEO of Mitchell Innovations right here. Maybe he'd like to explain to your faces why his profits are more important than our lives. All eyes turned to Carter, and he felt the weight of dozens of people whose homes and livelihoods hung in the balance of his decisions. He thought about the alternative development sites he'd been exploring, the millions it would cost to change. Of course, the questions his board would ask, but mostly he thought about the look in Lily's eyes, not just hurt, but disappointment. She'd believed he was someone better than the cold businessman standing before her now. Carter began, then stopped. In that moment, surrounded by the community he'd unknowingly been planning to displace, looking at the woman who had made him remember how to feel, Carter Mitchell made the most important decision of his life. "You're right," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "I've been approaching this all wrong. The development as planned will stop immediately." Gasps and surprised murmurs filled the room, but Carter's eyes remained locked on Lily's. "I can't undo the lies or the time I've wasted, but I can do better going forward. This community deserves better than what I was offering, and Lily," his voice softened, "you deserved honesty from me from the very beginning." Lily stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, without a word, she stepped down from the stage and walked out of the community center, leaving Carter standing before a room full of people whose lives he'd just promised to change, wondering if he'd lost the only person who had ever seen the man he could become, rather than just the success he'd achieved. When love rewrites everything. The days following the town hall meeting passed in a blur of corporate restructuring and personal anguish for Carter. True to his public promise, he immediately halted all development activities on Maple Street, a decision that sent shockwaves through Mitchell Innovations and cost the company over $12 million in sunk costs and penalty fees. "The board is asking serious questions about your judgment," his CFO, Marcus, warned during an emergency meeting. "This kind of impulsive decision-making isn't like you, Carter. What's really going on?" Carter stared out his office window toward the neighborhood he'd almost destroyed. "I made a mistake, Marcus. A big one. And sometimes fixing mistakes costs more than making them in the first place." While Carter navigated the corporate fallout of his decision, Lily threw herself into her work with desperate energy. The immediate threat to her bookstore had passed, but the emotional devastation of Carter's deception felt insurmountable. She'd trusted him completely, opened her heart to him, believed he understood and valued the same things she did. Discovering he was the very person threatening everything she loved felt like a betrayal too deep to forgive. "You can't avoid him forever," her best friend Maya pointed out one evening as they organized returned books. "He's been here every day for a week, sitting in that coffee shop across the street, just watching the store. He's probably making—" "Sure, his investment is secure," Lily replied bitterly, though she'd noticed Carter's presence too. Every morning when she opened the store, he was there. Every evening when she closed, he was still there. Never approaching, never trying to force a conversation, just present. "Lily, I saw the news coverage. He canceled a $100 million project to save this block. That doesn't sound like protecting an investment. That sounds like a man trying to prove something." Lily's hands stilled on the book she'd been shelving. She'd seen the business news reports, the speculation about Carter's uncharacteristic philanthropic decision, the stock market's negative reaction to Mitchell, Innovation's sudden change in direction. She'd also seen the more thoughtful pieces that analyzed the human impact of corporate development, articles that quoted residents and business owners praising Carter's reversal. "It doesn't change the fact that he lied to me for weeks," Lily said quietly. "How can I trust someone who looked me in the eye every day while planning to destroy everything I care about?" "Maybe," Maya suggested gently. "You should ask him that question directly." That evening, as Lily locked up the store, she finally acknowledged Carter sitting at his usual table across the street. Instead of walking to her apartment, she crossed the street and stood before his table. "Why?" she asked simply. Carter looked up from the untouched coffee he'd been staring at. Up close, Lily could see he looked exhausted, his usually impeccable appearance rumpled and worn. "Why what?" he asked, softly. "All of it. Why lie to me? Why cancel the project? Why sit here every day like some kind of tragic romantic hero?" Despite her anger, Lily's voice carried more hurt than hostility. Carter gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Will you sit, please? I know I don't deserve it, but—" After a moment's hesitation, Lily sat down, though she kept her posture, guarded. "I lied to you because I'm a coward," Carter began, his voice raw with honesty. "For the first time in my adult life, I met someone who saw me as just a person. Not my money, not my success, not what I could do for them, just me. And I was terrified that if you knew who I really was, you'd see me the way most people do, as a cold businessman who values profits over people. Aren't you?" Lily asked bluntly. "I was," Carter admitted. "I built my entire identity around success and control. I told myself that emotions were inefficient, that personal connections were liabilities. Then I met you, and suddenly none of that made sense anymore." He leaned forward, his eyes intense with sincerity. "You made me remember what it felt like to care about something beyond quarterly reports and market share. Every evening I spent in your store, every conversation we had about books and dreams and what makes life meaningful. Those weren't lies, Lily. Those were the most honest moments of my life. But you knew," Lily's voice broke slightly, "you knew the whole time that you were going to destroy everything I loved, and you said nothing." "I was going to tell you," Carter insisted. "I was working on alternatives, trying to find a way to save the bookstore before revealing who I was. I thought I could fix everything behind the scenes and then explain. I realize now how wrong that was. I should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning." Lily sat in silence for several minutes, processing his words. Around them, the evening bustle of the city continued. People rushing home from work, couples holding hands as they walked. Life moving forward despite the complicated conversation happening at a small cafe table. "What happens now?" she finally asked. "Now I spend the rest of my life trying to become the man you thought I was," Carter replied. "The man who deserves someone like you." "Carter," Lily began, but he held up a hand. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or a second chance," he said. "I know I broke something beautiful, and I'll have to live with that. But I needed you to know that everything you inspired in me, the desire to be better, to care about more than just success, that's real, and it's permanent." Carter stood up, leaving money on the table for his untouched coffee. "I'm implementing a new community development program through Mitchell Innovations. Instead of displacing existing businesses, we'll invest in supporting and expanding them. Pages and Dreams will be the first recipient. I've arranged for a grant that will allow you to purchase your building and expand however you want." "I don't want your guilt money," Lily protested, standing as well. "It's not guilt money," Carter replied gently. "It's what should have been done from the beginning. What would have been done if I'd been the man you believed I was." He started to walk away, then turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, Lily, meeting you changed everything for me. Even if I lost you in the process, I'm grateful for the reminder that there's more to life than what I'd been living." As Carter disappeared into the evening crowd, Lily stood alone on the sidewalk, her heart torn between lingering hurt and growing understanding of the profound impact their time together had had on both of their lives. Over the following weeks, Carter's actions spoke louder than his words. The community development program he'd mentioned became reality, bringing resources and investment to Maple Street while preserving its character and existing businesses. Pages and Dreams received not just funding but also volunteers from Mitchell Innovations, who helped organize events and expand programming. Lily watched from a distance as Carter quietly worked to repair the damage his original plans would have caused. He didn't seek credit or recognition, didn't use the program for publicity. He simply did the work, day after day, of building something better than what he'd initially envisioned. 1 month after their conversation at the cafe, Lily made a decision that surprised even herself. She began writing again. Not the novel she'd always dreamed of, but a different kind of story. She wrote about a man who had lost his way in the pursuit of success, and a woman who reminded him what it meant to care about something beyond himself. She wrote about forgiveness, second chances, and the courage it takes to love someone not for who they are, but for who they're trying to become. When she finished the story, Lily did something she'd never done before. She submitted it to a publisher. 2 weeks later, she received an acceptance letter and a request for more work. The day her story was published in a literary magazine, Carter appeared at her bookstore for the first time since the town hall meeting. "I read it," he said simply, holding a copy of the magazine. "And?" Lily asked, her heart racing. "It's beautiful," Carter replied, "and hopeful. More hopeful than I deserve, but exactly what I needed to read." They stood looking at each other across the bookstore, surrounded by shelves of stories about love and loss, redemption and second chances. "I've been thinking," Lily said slowly, "about what you said that first night we met. About books being acts of faith, trusting an author to take you on a journey even when you don't know where you're going." Carter nodded, remembering. "Maybe that's what relationships are too," Lily continued. "Acts of faith, trusting someone to grow and change and become better even when they've disappointed you." "Lily," Carter's voice was barely a whisper, "I'm not saying it'll be easy," she added quickly. "Trust has to be rebuilt, and that takes time. But I've watched you these past months, seen how you've changed not just your business practices, but your entire approach to life. The man who's been quietly working to rebuild this community isn't the same man who originally planned to destroy it." Carter took a tentative step forward. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we could try again," Lily said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "Not picking up where we left off, but starting over. Honestly this time, with both of us knowing exactly who the other person is." "I would like that more than anything," Carter replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But I need you to know I'm not the same person you met that first night. Meeting you, losing you, finding my way back, it changed me fundamentally. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I'll never lie to you again." "Good," Lily smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given him since the town hall meeting. "Because the person I fell in love with wasn't perfect either. He was just honest about his imperfections and willing to grow beyond them." 6 months later, on a rainy Thursday evening, exactly 1 year after they'd first met, Carter returned to Pages and Dreams, carrying a small velvet box and a larger plan that would change both their lives forever. The bookstore was hosting another poetry reading, this time featuring work by local authors including Lily, whose writing had flourished in the wake of her renewed sense of purpose and perspective. As the evening wound down and the last customers departed, Carter approached Lily with visible nervousness. "Do you remember what you said about books being acts of faith?" he asked. "Of course," Lily replied, curious about his sudden seriousness. "Well, I've written something for you," Carter said, pulling out a handwritten journal. "It's not very good. I'm still learning how to write about feelings instead of algorithms. But it's the truest thing I've ever created." Lily accepted the journal with reverence, recognizing the significance of Carter returning to the creative, expression he'd abandoned as a child. As she read, tears began to form in her eyes. The pages contained not just a love story, but a detailed plan for their future together. Carter had outlined his vision for expanding Pages and Dreams into a community literary center, complete with writing workshops, author residencies, and educational programs for underserved youth. More than that, he'd included architectural sketches, financial projections, and partnership proposals with other local businesses. "Carter, this is incredible," Lily whispered, turning page after page of detailed, planning and heartfelt declarations of love. "Turn to the last page," Carter said softly. There, in his careful handwriting, was a simple question. "Will you marry me and help me write a better story than either of us could create alone?" Lily looked up to find Carter on one knee, holding out a ring that somehow perfectly captured her aesthetic. Vintage-inspired but unique, elegant but not ostentatious. "I know I have no right to ask this," Carter said, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. "I know I broke your trust once, and I know I'm still learning how to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you. But I love you, Lily, not just for who you are, but for who you've helped me become. And if you'll have me, I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that some stories really do have happy endings." Through her tears, Lily could see the man she'd fallen in love with that first candlelit evening. The one who'd shared his childhood dreams and listened to her read poetry with genuine wonder. But she could also see the man he'd become through struggle and growth, someone who'd learned to value people over profit, community over conquest, love over control. "Yes," she said simply, then louder as joy overcame her initial shock. "Yes, of course. Yes." As Carter slipped the ring onto her finger, Lily realized that their story had never really been about a single night that changed everything. It had been about two people learning to trust each other enough to change together, to grow beyond their individual limitations and create something beautiful and lasting. 1 year later, they were married in a ceremony held at Pages and Dreams, surrounded by the community that had brought them together and witnessed their journey. The bookstore had indeed expanded into the literary center Carter had envisioned, serving as a bridge between his technological resources and Lily's creative vision. As they exchanged vows surrounded by books and friends, Carter and Lily knew they were beginning the greatest story of their lives, one where love really could rewrite any ending, where second chances led to forever promises, and where two people brave enough to trust each other could indeed live happily ever after. Their first dance was interrupted by applause, not just from their wedding guests, but from the entire neighborhood that had watched their love story unfold. As they moved together in the warm glow of candlelight and fairy lights strung between bookshelves, both Carter and Lily understood that some of life's most beautiful chapters begin not with perfect circumstances, but with imperfect people willing to become better for love. The end.